Appearing on the Ideas stage today, U.S. Supreme Court Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson, David Axelrod, Karl Rove, Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer, and Jamie Dimon. And now, please welcome the Atlantic's Nicholas Thompson.
What a beautiful, again, this is amazing. Thank you so much. I'm Nicholas Thompson. I'm CEO of The Atlantic. I am delighted once again to welcome you to day 2 of the Atlantic Festival. Thank you to everyone who's been here. We had a great day yesterday. Packed houses, lots of fun, really good food. We learned who's going to win the election. We learned how to live forever. We solved all the ethical dilemmas in AI. We got some insight into whether the former Speaker of the House thinks the former president is certifiably insane. It was a good day. So we've been around for 167 years, as I mentioned yesterday, publishing essential journalism. Every year, we have the privilege of bringing you here and bring our journalism to life at this festival. We take great pride in bringing together an array of speakers and perspectives. We have an amazing, amazing group this morning. Supreme Court Justice. We have a play. We're going to do an actual play here at the Atlantic Festival. We have a leader of one of the world's largest banks, and we have a gene editing technician. We have everything today. We hope the conversations are informative. We hope they'll expand your thinking. And we hope they will challenge all of your assumptions that you've had before, and that you'll leave with some new ideas, and also that you'll subscribe. Before we begin, I want to take a moment to acknowledge our underwriters. No underwriters, no festival. Thank you so much to all the companies that support this work. Our presenting level underwriters, Eli Lilly and Company, Microsoft, Southern Company, the W.K. Kellogg Foundation. Supporting level underwriters, Allstate and Evernorth Health Services. And our contributing level underwriters, Arnold Ventures, Calm, Genentech, Goldman Sachs, John D. and Catherine T. MacArthur Foundation, Uber, and Visit Seattle. That's a lot of them. It's great. Please silence your cell phones, but please keep them nearby so that you can tweet, Instagram, do whatever you want to do. Use the hashtag TAF24 and enjoy the show.
Please welcome U.S. Supreme Court Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson with Atlantic staff writer Clint Smith.
Quite a warm reception for you.
Yes, wonderful.
Yeah. Thank you all so much for being here. Welcome to day 2 of the Atlantic Festival. It is a pleasure to be here with Justice Brown Jackson. And we have a limited amount of time, so we're going to get started. We were talking backstage about how, the process of writing a book has been beneficial in all sorts of ways. And one of those ways you mentioned was that it's gotten you sort of out of the stuffy chambers and into the world. Can you talk a little bit more about the experience of both writing the book, but also the experience of moving through the world with the book, and how that's shaped your sense of how people are responding to you and the work and your story?
Yes, well, it's been a whirlwind, but amazing. I actually started writing the book just a little over 2 years ago, right after the confirmation, because I was just grateful to have gotten through the process, and I wanted to pay tribute to the people and the circumstances that I felt were most responsible for that accomplishment. So the book is really a reflection on my life. I go back to my grandparents, my parents, and all of the mentors that I've had. And I've been so gratified by the reception that I've received as part of promoting a book, which I didn't know. I didn't know that I had to actually go out and...
they don't tell you when you sign up.
They don't tell you. You think you're just writing it and that's it. But, putting it out into the world has been just so wonderful because I've been to a number of cities, seen a lot of people, different people who are telling me that they see me, that they understand, that they're interested in the court, perhaps in a way that they hadn't been before. And so I feel very pleased about that.
Yeah. One of the things that's so striking and moving about your memoir is the level of focus that it has on your childhood.
Yes.
You're very honest about aspects of your childhood in ways that may surprise some people. And I was particularly struck, especially at the beginning, by the way you talk about your relationship with race, and you talk about how, as a young person, you experienced a version of W.E.B. Du Bois's double consciousness,
yes.
even when you didn't necessarily have the language for it at the time. Can you
yes.
explain a little bit about what you meant?
So one of the things that happened to me as a young person is that I knew that I had stage presence. I knew that I could, talk to people. My mother, from when I was very little, put me in all kinds of public speaking competitions and things. And so I had the ability to sort of express myself, but I enjoyed mostly being alone. I was sort of an introvert. Yeah. And I think, and I reflect on this in the book, that part of it was that I grew up in educational spaces that were predominantly white, right. And that I felt a lot the pressure of being one of a few and having to represent and having to be in a scenario in which I felt as though people were, wanting to know how Black people behave in these kinds of situations, and can she actually do the work? And I was a pleaser in terms of wanting to please my parents, wanting to do the best I could in every environment, and there was a lot of pressure. Yeah. And so what I noticed was being alone was like, and I say this in the book, a soul deep sigh of relief, because I could just be myself and not feel the pressure to have to perform.
Did you feel that, even as a young child, did you feel this sense of having to perform, having to represent your race or your family in a particular way? I
mean, I think so. I think so. When you're, in an environment where you are one of a few, and especially given the sort of historical dynamics of race, which I was conscious of from a very young age. One of the things I've been saying in my book tour is that the significance of the timing of my birth cannot be overstated. And what I mean by that is that I was part of the first post-civil rights generation. I was born in 1970, which was within 5 or 6 years of the Civil Rights Act, the Voting Rights Act, and the end of Jim Crow segregation, which my parents had actually been subject to. And so when I was born, it was like a time of awakening and reopening for African Americans. My mother, my father were very conscious of their African American identity. They had gone to HBCUs and historically Black colleges and universities. And so they gave their daughter an African name. Ketanji Onyeka is the English translation of lovely, Ketanji Onyeka is the African for lovely one. My aunt was in the Peace Corps in Africa when I was born, and she sent my mother African names. And so this was part of their attempt to really infuse me with my cultural identity. But then I go to a bunch of predominantly white schools, and I feel very different in a way.
Speaking of the sort of, you talk a lot about the sort of intergenerational aspect of where your family has come from, just as you've alluded to there. And there was a moment that I think illustrated the learning curve of this, because you're acutely aware of it now, and you were certainly growing up, but there was a moment in the book where you write about reading a note from your grandmother, and you didn't necessarily know that your grandmother had written the note at the time, but there were a lot of misspellings, a lot of words that weren't written correctly, a lot of letters not written correctly, and you laughed at the note. You thought it was really funny that whoever had written this note didn't know how to spell, didn't know how to write legibly. And your mom comes in, and she sees you laughing at this. And can you talk about what happens?
Oh, wow. I was in trouble. I was in trouble. I mean, this was really a lesson in humility for me. My mother was crestfallen because she felt like she was raising me better than this. That, she said something to the effect of, just because you have done so well on your spelling tests and you have all these opportunities. You're no bit better than anybody else who didn't have a chance to go to school. And I don't want you to go out into the world thinking that you're any better than anybody else. So and I was devastated. Yeah. I cried all afternoon and I apologized to my grandmother, who I don't even know knew what was really going on. Yeah. But it was really, it was a moment that has stuck with me throughout my whole life.
I think that's something that so many of us who come into some sort of relative success or positions of power or influence think about is that sort of intergenerational impact. I mean, certainly I think of it in my case, my grandfather born in 1930, Jim Crow, Mississippi. And I think about often also how, but to your point about that what is happening in your life is only possible
That's
in
right.
this moment. I think about
That's
the sort
right.
of arbitrary nature of birth and circumstance.
That's exactly
that have
right.
made it so that, there was one teacher who thought my grandfather, was smart, and this is in a moment when there was no secondary education for Black people in Mississippi. Right. And so he was picked from, one out of however many primary school students there were, and he was sent to a different county.
That's right.
Because there was no high school for Black people in the county where he was raised or where he lived and was raised. And so then he was sent off to a secondary school that gave him all manner of different opportunities
Yes.
that put our family in a position where we could build off of the sort of foundation that he was built. But I think often about how easily he could have not been picked by that principal.
So easy. And what it does is it makes me feel grateful. I've only thought about being a judge, for example, because my father went back to law school when I was very little. And so I've thought about the law since I was, 4 years old. But in middle school, I learned about Constance Baker Motley, who was the first African-American female federal judge. And the idea that there was a Black woman who could be a judge was like just transformational for me. But, Constance Baker Motley could not have been appointed to the Supreme Court solely because of the time in which she was born. Yeah. So it makes me feel just so extraordinarily grateful to be in this position.
One of the things you mentioned was that you were someone who liked to perform.
Yes.
And, we can talk about performance in the sort of Du Boisian context of it, but we can also talk about performance in terms of the literal aspect of being on stage.
Yes.
And you, in your, I believe it was your college essay, in one of your supplemental college essays, you said, I want to be the first Black woman on the Supreme Court to also appear in a Broadway musical.
Yes.
And so, we got the first part. What I want to know is, are we going to get the second part?
Maybe with all of this touring, people keep asking me that, so I'm waiting for the right opportunity.
Is there a particular musical or Broadway show that you would love to star in? I'm sure we can make it happen.
We
just send them
any of them. I love all manner of Broadway musicals are the best. Wicked, love Wicked.
There we go. Wicked producers, wherever you are on the internet, now's your chance. But you grew up on stage. You did.
Yes.
You were in speech and debate, and the thing that you specifically focused on, your area of expertise, was a sort of oration that was piecing together different poems and plays.
There were two different things. So I did original oratory was my main event, and that is just writing your own speeches and memorizing them and delivering them. But then I also did something called dramatic and humorous interpretation, and that's where you take parts of plays, and it's like Anna Devere Smith does the one-woman show where you do all the different characters. It's like that.
How would you say that your experience I also want to be clear, you were like a theater kid. Like
I was
you
a
loved theater, you loved being on stage. You loved it so much that you missed your high school graduation.
Yes.
Because you wanted to go to the national competition for the
and I was president of my class, so it was a big deal.
Yeah.
But I had to choose between hosting the graduation as class president or going to nationals in original oratory. And I did the right thing because I won.
There you go. There you go. How would you say the experience of being on stage or experience in theater, to what extent, if at all, did it shape your sense of self, but also shape how you approach your work as a judge and a justice?
You know, some people have asked me that, and I wonder, you haven't really put this together before, but I wonder whether the ability to sort of embody other people and other worlds and have the perspective of others that comes from acting and being in theater was helpful in the work that I do as a judge. I mean, what we do is evaluate arguments that are being brought by different people about, what is, what should be. And in order to do that, I think having a wide range of experiences, whether they're your personal experiences or ones that you've learned about through something like theater, I think that's very helpful.
You went to Harvard. You were very involved in theater at Harvard. And after you graduated, you did not immediately go to law school. For a brief amount of time, you were a journalist.
Yes.
And so Jeff Goldberg is here somewhere. He's probably like, this is our chance. You know, the producers of Wicked are saying it's their chance. The editor-in-chief of The Atlantic is saying it's his chance. How did what was your experience in journalism like?
Well, it was very interesting. I loved it. I had a writing professor in college who wanted me not to go to law school. And then I had my dad, who was a lawyer, who said, you're absolutely going to law school. And so the compromise was that I applied to law school while I was in college, and I deferred a year, which is now pretty common, but back then wasn't all that common. And my writing professor arranged for me to do a year, he hoped longer, at Time Magazine. Okay. And it was really fun. I was in New York City, as a young person, and I'm knowing that I'm going to go to law school, so I didn't really have to do all the things, but I learned about journalism, and it was very interesting. And I love to write, so yeah.
You love to write.
I do.
I'm fast forwarding a little bit, but when you were a clerk, during one of your clerkships, this is a period of time, and we're going to go back to when you met your husband in a second, but there was a period of time in which I think you all were living in different cities because of he was in residency or fellowship somewhere, and you were doing your clerkship. And so after work, you had some time on your hands.
Yes.
And you said, as one does, you said, hey, I'm going to write a novel.
I tried.
So there's a Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson novel out there.
Maybe.
Somewhere. Could you tell us a little bit about what that was about, and if there's any hope that it might be pulled out of the drawer?
You know, it was so long ago. That was actually a very difficult time in my life, and maybe that's an impetus for writing, when you're going through challenging periods. We had just gotten married, my husband and I, and then we had to be separated because he was doing his residency and I was at a clerkship in Providence, Rhode Island. And, I just was feeling kind of down, and I said, let me try to put this into words. But it never really came together. I decided that writing a novel, I was much more of a nonfiction kind of person.
I think Random House might ask you to pull it out of the drawer,
yes,
just
they
so
might.
that they can see. But speaking of your husband, you all met in college.
We met in college,
and it was the origin story is funny because you all were in class together.
Yes.
And you were friends, and you were having conversations, and he would tap you on the shoulder, and you would have study groups, and we all knew. It's funny reading it because it's like, oh, okay, study group. We know what this is. But there was a point where you had him in one of your classes, and he was so engaging and so kind and so thoughtful. And there was another class that he was in, or that you believed he was in, and you would see him, and he would ignore you.
Yes.
And kind of like turn to the side.
Yes.
And you told your friends, and your friends were like, leave that guy alone.
Yes.
You don't want anything to do with him. But there was a twist.
There was a twist. So I said to them, my friends, I'm going to confront him. I'm going to confront him on one of the friendly days because this is too crazy. So I say to him, why don't you talk to me in our government class? And he says, I'm not taking a government class. And I said, yes, you are. I see you in the class. And he says, oh, you must be talking about my identical twin brother. And he absolutely has an identical twin brother. And I didn't know. So that's how we first met. Yes.
It feels like a line someone would use, but in this case, it's true.
It's true.
You all's relationship was really fascinating to read about because I think sometimes there can be these sort of overly reductive notions when you have, specifically around women who are in high-achieving jobs, really in these professional capacities. And there's this, are you going to lean in or are you going to lean out, right? And sort of an oversimplification of the seasonal nature of what it means to be in a partnership. Yes. And I think you all's partnership really reflects this idea of there are seasons to our personal and professional lives, and you all very much sort of, there would be periods of time in which you made your own professional and personal sacrifices to support him.
Absolutely.
And then periods of time where he did the same for you. Can you talk about how you all navigated that and then built your careers, had 2 children?
Yeah, well, it was not easy, but we were committed to having a true partnership in this way. And we met in college. We both knew we had significant professional interests. And we decided that we were going to do our best to try to get each other through the tough spots when we needed to. So what that meant was my husband is a surgeon, and he went to medical school and then went into residency as a surgeon. It's a very demanding period. And when he was doing that, there was a time in which I ended up getting a Supreme Court clerkship. I clerked for Justice Breyer. So he actually took a couple of years off in the middle of his residency, not off, but he did research, and his schedule got to be ratcheted back so that I could advance in terms of my doing the clerkship. And then after the clerkship, although I had wanted to stay in DC and start working right away here, he had to finish his residency. So we went back to Boston, and I kind of toggled back and let him finish his residency. And we did that sort of thing throughout our careers.
And this was the first person that you had dated.
Yes.
Because you wrote very honestly in the book about how you didn't date in high school and how it was a similar experience that many of the Black women and Black girls in your school, it was a similar experience that they had had.
Yes.
This being at a predominantly, and I think it speaks to something that many Black women in predominantly white spaces experience, this feeling of a feeling unwanted, unseen, being undesired. And so much so that you were as you said, the president of your class, but you weren't going to go to prom.
No.
Because...
Even though I was planning it.
Even though
because no one asked me. But, a friend ultimately said, you're planning everything. Who are you going with? You should go. We'll go together.
Yeah.
And so that was sort of my prom scenario.
Yeah. And so as you move forward and you met your husband, one of the things that was also interesting is that you had, maybe not reservations, but there were questions about how each of your parents would respond to, your husband is white, how each of your parents and their vastly different histories and backgrounds.
Vastly.
Could you talk a little bit about the background of his family, how that shaped your wariness or anxiety or fear of how they may or may not accept you and your family?
So his family, if you've heard of this term, they are Boston Brahmins. And this is like a social group that can trace their lineage back to the Mayflower. My husband is 7th generation Harvard. And I had barely heard of Harvard before I applied. And I'm a descendant from slaves on both sides. My grandparents on both sides are from Georgia. And so I was concerned as we started to date and get kind of serious about what this meant for our relationship and whether or not, his family would accept me. I had no real basis for this because they're lovely people and it was fine, but I just had these notions of what it might mean to enter this kind of family. At one point, I knew that his grandmother, for example, had agreed to pay for his medical school. And I was worried that if she knew that he was dating a black girl, that she might decide not to do that. And I had this, he was a letter writer when we were coming together as in our relationship. And I have this beautiful letter that he had written where he said something to the effect of, even if I have to take a job, even if I have to do something else, I choose you. I will always choose you. And so, so that gave me some, the sort of strength of our bond gave me some comfort. But, my parents were concerned. Yeah. My parents, who thought he was lovely and, met him, again, you heard a little bit about my parents. And so when he actually went very traditionally to ask my parents for their blessing, because he wanted to ask me to marry him, my dad was like, look, have you talked this over with your family? Not so long ago, I don't know that I would even have you in my house, and not to mention asking my daughter to marry you. But, I've seen how the two of you have been. We dated for 7 years before we got married, and we've been married for 28 years now. But my parents ended up, coming around because they saw him and understood that his family was supportive of our relationship.
You can clap for that. Speaking of your family, one of the things that I think makes you particularly unique among so many things as a justice is your both personal and professional proximity to the criminal legal system. You worked as a public defender. Even before that, you worked with clients who were entangled in the criminal legal system, who were indigent, who were in and out of poverty. You also had a family member who themselves was incarcerated and serving a life sentence. I would love for you to talk a little bit about your uncle. This is your brother's...
This is my father's brother. Who I talk about in the book.
Yeah.
So we growing up were much closer to my mother's side of the family. She had a very supportive 5 brothers and sisters, really strong family. My father was raised essentially by a single mother. He basically raised himself. He too had 4 brothers and sisters, but not really close. And one of his older brothers got sort of wrapped up in drugs and was, this is the year, a freshman in college. And I knew my uncle from around, but he got involved in basically a drug courier operation. And I talk about it in the book. I don't find this out for years later. So in the book, I talk about having discovered these details. But essentially, he was pulled over after going into a drug house and taking out some drugs. And the police were surveilling the premises and just followed him and then arrested him. And he had enough drugs in his possession that it triggered very, very substantial penalties. And he was within 6 months of the enactment of the federal 3 strikes law. And so he got a life sentence. And I didn't know this until I was a federal public defender, and he called me. This is maybe 15 years after he was incarcerated. And I'm a defender. My dad tells him I'm a defender, and he decides to call me from jail. And wanted me to review his records and see if there was anything that could be done in his case. And I knew I couldn't help him because I wasn't in his jurisdiction. I'm not his lawyer, but I looked at the records and discovered all of this. And I talk about it in the book because it's a very kind of significant experience, not only for me, but for our country in terms of how we handle situations like this. But eventually, I turned his records over to a friend who took his case pro bono, and years later, I find out that he is among the last group of defendants who are pardoned by President Obama on his very last tranche of people, which I find out by looking on the website, like everybody else, to see if he'd gotten any relief. And it was pretty extraordinary. He served 28 years And he was 70 some odd years old when he was arrested at 50. So it was very tragic, and he died a year later. He was out for less than a year. So it was very informative in a lot of ways, but you say proximity. One of my favorite quotes is from Oliver Wendell Holmes, who says that the life of the law is not logic, it is experience. And so having experienced all of these things, I think really gives me an interesting perspective on the law.
Yeah. And what about the public defender piece? Like, how does the experience, because it is not often the case, many of our judges at the highest level and justices often come from a prosecutorial background.
They do.
How did the experience of being a federal public defender shape your perspective and how you think about what you do and how you engage on the court?
Well, I think that it probably had the most impact at the trial level. So I was the trial judge for the longest period of time, 7 years, before becoming a Court of Appeals judge and then getting onto the Supreme Court. And as a trial judge, you actually interact with criminal defendants. You are trying cases, you are sentencing people. And I think that my perspective from having represented indigent criminal defendants really shaped how I communicated with defendants who came into my courtroom. One of the things I noticed as an appellate defender, which is what I was that my clients really didn't understand what had happened to them in the system. They couldn't really help me with the project of evaluating their trials. And I was like, you've just gone through the most consequential thing in your life and you don't know. And it was because people weren't explaining to them. People weren't talking to them. People weren't treating them with respect. And what was happening is that they then were having a hard time taking responsibility for what they had done. What you want, I think, in the criminal justice system is for people to, if they have to go to jail, to actually go in and come out and reform, to go in and reflect on the terrible thing that happened and vow not to do it again. And there's a blockage that happens for people when they go in and they actually spend most of their time talking about how victimized they were or feeling like the system didn't treat them well, because then they can't really do the work to change their behavior. So I used that in my thought process and my procedures with criminal defendants as a trial judge, communicating with them, using their names. Sometimes judges just call people defendants, explaining every step of the process so that there was no confusion as to what was going on. And I thought that was very important, and it was a lesson that I learned from being a defender.
You also write so beautifully about your children.
Yes.
And your oldest, you also write very honestly about the difficulty of some of the difficulties your oldest daughter experienced, having been diagnosed with autism. And you write very movingly and honestly in ways that I think any parent, whether or not you have an autistic child or not, will appreciate in terms of what it means to find the best school, the best support to accommodate what your child needs. And I encourage everybody to, this is one of the most moving parts of the book. There was a period toward the end of the book, a passage toward the end, where you basically have your younger daughter's college essay, which I gotta say is like the best college essay I've ever read. Like I was like, is she a novelist? Like,
she's a great writer.
It was unbelievable.
Yeah, she's a great writer.
And she was writing about her relationship with her sister.
Yes.
And it's so remarkable. I wish we had the book here so I could just read it out loud. But what did that mean to you?
Yeah.
Because it's not. It was difficult for her.
It was very difficult. I mean, one of the things that happened in my family, and sometimes I think happens in a lot of families where you have neurodiversity or you have some issue with one child, is that it takes so much focus to try to stabilize them and to support them and to help them, that if there are other children, they sometimes feel like, kind of off to the side. And then the relationship between the two of them can be complicated as a result. And so it was just fascinating to me because my daughter wrote this essay and it was revelatory of the perspective of the other child in a situation like that. So I thought she gave me permission to put it in the book because I just thought it was so wonderful. And if we were going to talk about this experience as a family, I wanted her perspective to be reflected as well.
And if you're an audiobook person, she reads it herself.
She does.
In the book. And it blew me away. I listened to it 5 times. I was just like, 17-year-old wrote this?
She is extraordinary.
I was like, is she Toni Morrison? What is going on? So now you're on the Supreme Court.
Yes.
There we go. And, certainly the arbitrary nature of birth and circumstance, periods of time in history, how lucky and fortuitous it is. You also spoke it into existence. Like you were, just as you have spoken Broadway into what will exist. I'm curious what the experience of, what's something that surprised you about the court?
I think something that surprised me is how formal the court is, even behind the scenes. I had clerked on the court, so there wasn't a whole lot about it that was new, but the spaces in which the justices are by themselves, it's just interesting to me. So we shake hands with every other justice before every argument and before every conference, and it's just sort of like a formality. When we're in conference, we speak in a certain order and vote in a certain order. It's very kind of formal and traditional in a way that I was not anticipating. It's the junior justice, not anticipating.
and as we wrap up, because we have so many great conversations coming up after us, but I'm curious what it feels like to step into a position, such a historical position in this way. When I told my parents and grandparents that I would be interviewing Justice Brown Jackson, it meant so much because you mean so much to so many people, to Black people, to women, to Black women. What does it feel like to occupy that position? To be that your position, that your identity, that you are almost bigger than you.
It's extraordinary. Again, all I can say is that I feel grateful every day to be able to serve the American people in this way, that I know that I didn't do it on my own, and that's part of the reason why I wrote the book, because I wanted people to see the influences, and I hope that I can inspire other young girls who are thinking about the law to do big things. Because I feel like I'm just so fortunate to be here.
Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson.
Thank you. Thank you.
For a conversation about the stakes of the 2024 election, please welcome political strategists Karl Rove and David Axelrod. And here to guide the discussion, please welcome Atlantic staff writer Elaina Plott Calabro.
Enthusiastic bunch here.
Yeah, I like it. Hi, how's everyone doing? Good? Love it. So my guests here need no introduction, obviously. David Axelrod, Karl Rove, two of the most really defining leading political strategists of their respective parties of their time. And I'm just so grateful to have you both here to talk about this important election. But there's so many directions we could take this conversation. But I guess my first question would just be, what is keeping you up at night about this race when you think about the stakes?
Every single damn thing.
The thing that is It is an unpredictable race. I mean, and the stakes are so large, but it is as close as can be. We were talking before about these public polls, which are all over the place, and you know they play with people's emotions. You know, we can't lose, we can't win. But the truth is, it's very, very close, and we don't even know what will tip the scales. We were talking about the fact that elections can, you know, we just saw what happened in North Carolina with a governor's candidate down there. We've got a potential broader war in the Middle East. There's so many things that can happen that you can't count on if you're running a campaign. You can't predict, but you know it's going to have an impact.
So you're saying if you were running Mark Robinson's campaign, you would not have predicted the oppo that came
If I were running Mark Robinson's campaign, I would jump off a bridge.
And y'all, I'm not going to explain really the context there. I leave that to you and Google. I'm not going to discuss it here. But I'm glad you mentioned, you know, the unpredictability in terms of what will tip the scales, because I've thought a lot recently about, do endorsements really matter anymore? Do, you know, with the exception, of course, of Joe Biden's debate and how that monumentally changed the race, do you think we're in a moment where Kamala Harris and Donald Trump debating actually will inform or move voters at this point?
Yeah, look, the race is so narrowly divided that, yeah, look, 13% of people say Taylor Swift would cause them to support Harris. 13% is a big number when the divide between the two is, in the Real Clear Politics average, she's up by 1.9%. And in the 538 average nationwide, she's up by 3.3. So if you could affect 1% of the electorate, particularly if they happen to be 1% of the electorate in Pennsylvania, Arizona, you know, Michigan, Wisconsin, North Carolina, Georgia, Nevada, that's a big impact. And that's why one of the reasons why it's so unpredictable is he has a high floor and a low ceiling, and the enthusiasm for her is off of the charts, mainly as a sense of relief. I was at the Democratic Convention, which is sort of like Satan going to the First Baptist Church. But it was, I say it's my 5th convention, Democratic Convention, and there was
I held his pitchfork.
Yeah. At the Republican Convention, I held his. But there was a palpable sense of relief at the Democratic Convention. They all knew instinctively in their gut that they were going to lose if it was Joe Biden, and now they had a chance to win. And so you've got an energized, you know, his base is more energized than hers is, but she's got more room to grow as she, you know, strengthens among Black, Hispanic, and young voters. But the number of people who are left up to grabs are primarily one of two universes: low propensity voters who are only now waking up to the fact that there is a presidential election. One of David's compatriots, very smart guy, said at the Democratic Convention, he told me, we're studying those people, and they pay attention to politics roughly 4 minutes a week.
I love that for them.
Yeah, and then the other group are people who are saying, I don't want to vote for her because she's part of the Biden administration, and I don't want to vote for him because he's him. And how do I make up my mind?
This is an interesting point. One of the plot lines here is who represents change in this election. And Trump is fighting hard to make her the status quo by making her an exemplar of the Biden administration and assigning the things that people don't like about Biden to her. And she's making him the incumbent and her building her race about turning the page on Trump and Trumpism. That battle in some ways will tell.
David, you and I have spoken about this a lot, especially throughout her vice presidency. One of the main issues that Kamala Harris had was that voters just didn't really know much about her.
Yeah.
And she's been reluctant to really delve into biography or kind of assert herself in that traditional way, I would say. But are we at a point in the race where you feel like she is successfully doing more of that? She obviously hasn't sat for a lot of major interviews at this point. Do you think
you're not the first journalist to mention that to me?
Well, so I want to know, do you think that will actually hurt her in the end?
Look, first of all, no vice president is really well known. Let's just start there. It's like, to me, the whole argument that all of a sudden she's the decision maker. When you hear the Trump campaign tell the story, like nobody talks about the Pence years or the Quayle years or, you know, I mean, vice presidents
the Biden years.
Yeah, so, well, I mean, the fact is he wasn't that known. Vice presidents sort of stand behind the president, but they're not the decision makers. I think there was a lot to learn about Kamala Harris. I think, for example, their initial burst of media and the attention at the convention on her work as an attorney general, her work as a prosecutor, which frankly she didn't feature 4 years ago, was very important. But people keep peeling layers. They want to know more about you. They want to know what's in your core. I said years ago that presidential races were MRIs for the soul, and whoever you are, you know, people they'll find out and they'll want to know. So one way you reveal that is through interviews and town halls and unscripted interactions. And I think she needs to do more of that between now and the election to give people comfort. I think the country is ready to say goodbye to Donald Trump. I don't think there's a majority. Well, and here you have an absolute perfect representation of the American electorate. So you heard them. But the country's ready to vote against Trump, but they want to know that she's an acceptable alternative, and she's made progress in that, and her favorables are going up and so on. But I do think that there's more turns of the wheel that involve unscripted kinds of interactions.
But the race being as close as it is, I mean, how confident are you that the country really is ready to move on from Donald Trump? Or is that they're just kind of this immovable base that, you know, nothing, a debate, an interview is not going to shift how they feel about this man?
Well, I mean, the question is, where is Trump's ceiling? He's got a high floor. We know that. But he also has had a low ceiling.
Look, I think it's 47, 48. But let's not kid ourselves. The country is deeply divided, and there are a lot of people who, you know, have gotten ingrained in that position. They will readily admit. Like, I travel a lot. People come up to me and say, you know, where's your whiteboard? And but there are a lot of Trump supporters who have concerns about him, but it's the alternative. They feel that they're not part of the system, that their goals, their interests, their needs are not being met by the political elite, and that that there is a battle, and the battle is media, culture, Hollywood, elite business, corporate America, and the political establishment against them. They're in flyover country, and we've not had. You know, I was hopeful that Biden would do something to take care of part of that, but he didn't. He became not the transitional president. I'm here to turn over to a newer generation of leadership, but instead I'm the most transformational president since at least Lyndon Johnson and FDR, which was working out his angst about feeling like, hey, I was the vice president of the Obama administration and he didn't back me for president. So I'm going to get back at Obama and Clinton by saying I'm more transformational than either of those administrations. And but do not kid yourself. There will be people who will drag themselves over broken glass in order to vote for Donald Trump. And the only way that she's going to be able to beat them is to articulate a vision. I think Peggy Noonan hit it in her column for tomorrow. This is empty versus angry. She did a masterful rollout, and I agree with David. Prosecutor, attorney general, growing up, single mom. This was a masterfully done Democratic convention and a terrific rollout. But in presidential campaigns, there comes a moment where you need to change, where you've played that for a while. Now you've got to play another stanza. Yeah. And it's the moment for her to sort of say, here's what I'm doing. Peggy nails her. I mean, this interview that she did with the Philadelphia TV local anchor, I got a question about the economy, and when you finish reading the answer or listening to the answer, it was not really clear what she was doing, except she did grow up in a middle-class household, and she does care about you, and et cetera. David says it's an MRI of the soul. I'm not scientific. This is like the emperor's new clothes. We're going to see these two candidates at the end of the parade as they really are, buck naked, hopefully, on a good day. it's time for her to give some meat to this, because Trump could have taken her in that debate. It was shocking to me that he could not prosecute the case against her on inflation, economy, and the border, but instead, every time she trolled him, he fell for it, which shows the lack of discipline in his campaign.
Yeah, she was
But
Pavlov.
also
She
it
was
shows
Pavlov.
her
He was the dog.
strategy. I think it showed her command of the stage.
Oh, yeah, no, she
She
demonstrated.
knew exactly.
She accomplished that in the debate. She commanded the stage. She looked strong. She looked like a plausible president. She spent a lot more time prosecuting him than revealing herself. Right. And that is the question that people want answered. To Karl's point, presidential races are like pole vaulting. You clear a height and then the bar gets raised. And now the next bar is, can you articulate the vision in ways that don't sound canned, that sound organic and real, and can you be, revealing of yourself so that you don't sound like you're reciting lines? And she's gonna, I think she'll have to make the sale. She's gonna need to do.
Yeah, not to say what she's done hasn't worked. Take a look at the gap between who do you think is better able to handle the economy, inflation, and the border was like this with Biden, and it's like this with her. And in fact, there's now a couple of polls that suggest that on the question of the economy, that people's projection of her being able to handle it is almost the same as their forward-looking projections of how he would handle it.
Yeah. When we think about, I want to stay on this for a minute, what it will take for this country to really turn the page on Donald Trump and really the Republican Party. I think about the 2022 midterm elections where in Arizona and these various states, you would have the Donald Trump-esque candidate win the primaries, but they couldn't win the general election. And so I remember there was a lot of commentary at that time. People are moving on. But what I felt that often glossed over was these candidates like Kari Lake are still winning their primaries. In some places quite handily. What is it going to take for Republican leadership to sort of move the primary electorate where they think the party should go instead of following it?
Yeah, Karl, what are they going to do?
It's 2-1. It's even. Look, I may be wrong about this, but let's assume for a moment that he loses. What's the future of the Republican Party going to be like? There'll be a battle. The good news for more traditional Republicans is that he's sui generis, which I know there are a lot of Latinists among the Atlantic crowd. He's unique. And who would follow him? Don Jr.? Right now he's busy maybe right now he's trying to figure out which girlfriend he actually has. But,
wow.
Josh Hawley, J.D. Vance, you take those and match them up against a Brian Kemp or a Glenn Youngkin or a Tim Scott or, fill in the blank. And it's hard to see that they have anywhere near the ability to mobilize a populist movement that he has. This is about, remember, this is the guy who we saw on our television sets for years as The Apprentice, the head of The Apprentice, and the folk hero in New York, and the gigantic persona, and really a personality. I mean, what human being could go through what he has gone through and be standing on their own 2 feet? So give him credit. But I don't see the person that follows him, because look, he has no ideology. He has a couple of touch points, one of which he stumbled on. Coming down that stair he talked about, when he got down the golden escalator, border, and tariffs, which he's long been on. But the rest of this stuff, everybody should have IVF. And don't do it. It just encourages me, Yeah. My favorite line of his acceptance speech: "We're going to cure Alzheimer's and cancer very quickly, and men will not be allowed to participate in women's sports." Like when I get up in the morning, those two things are right there in front of me, linked together inexorably. So. Want to hear my Bill Clinton?
Here all week.
Hillary's the most qualified person ever run for president. She's more qualified than I was. She's just a marvelous individual. She'll do a fantastic job here.
All right, I'm really going to shift the tone here to talk about assassination attempts and political violence.
We were having such fun.
Right. I have to get some,
Got it.
In the past week, we've seen a second apparent assassination attempt on Donald Trump. We have Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer coming to join this stage later.
Guy in Alaska who got arrested for threatening to kill 6 Supreme Court justices. You know,
what does this say about where this country is at right now, culturally, politically, and what is it going to take for it to change?
You know, this is, I mean, I was horrified. Everybody should be by what happened in Butler, about the events of last Sunday. And I know, and you know, but we have to be honest about this. If you encourage you know, and everybody, I know that Trump folks will say, well, you can't, you know, blame the victim here. But the fact is that his rhetoric and his appeal has been tinged with permission structure for people. When you tell people that if we lose, you won't have a country anymore, you know, and we saw it on January 6th. It was his words that precipitated a insurrection, violent insurrection at the Capitol. So you can't sow the seeds of violence and then play the victim. And that, you know, this is not the issue that's going to decide the election. The Atlantic's been very good on this issue, but the fact is that's what's at stake here. We need leadership that discourages a culture of violence. Violence is antithetical to democracy. Democracy means settling our differences at the voting booth and not through bullets, ballots and not bullets. That is not, you know, when you say Proud Boys stand back and stand by, they know what that means. So, you know, there are people, you know, social media has a huge role in this, but this is a huge challenge to our democracy. Are we going to legitimate this as a tool? And the other thing is, are we going to activate disturbed people who can have, you know, free access to any weapon they want to act on these impulses? So there's a lot here.
Karl?
I worked in that building, so I feel very strongly. I was 20 years old when I worked in the Capitol, and so I share a lot of David's feelings about January 6th. I want every one of those sons of bitches who attacked a policeman to be thrown in jail for a long time. But let's be careful. I don't remember the outrage. I had a friend who was playing baseball and ended up throwing himself on the body of one of his female colleagues in the bottom of a bunker as a madman attempted to kill people. And Steve Scalise will carry those wounds the rest of his life. And I don't remember the outrage.
Well,
but we've gone through this before as a country, and it wasn't a pleasant period. Everybody who was alive in November of 1963 knows when they heard about the news. And everybody remembers April 4th of 1968, and 6 weeks later when Robert Kennedy is killed, and how Gerald Ford was shot, their attempted assassination in California 18 days apart, and thank God the gun misfired because she was 6 feet away from him. And we all remember, you know, George Corley Wallace, not too many miles from here in suburban Maryland, getting shot 5 times when he ran for president in the Democratic primary in 1972 and came within 1.8% in the popular vote of the guy who won the nomination, George McGovern. And 2 months after he got inaugurated, Ronald Reagan being shot in this town, outside the Washington Hilton. And not just the violence aimed at our political leaders, but for in an 18-month period in 1972 and 73, there are 2,500 domestic bombings in the United States by radicals on the left aiming to disrupt the war. So we've been through this, and what happened is it required the country to try and find a way to come together and treat people with respect, mutual respect on both sides of the aisle, and it wasn't easy to do, and it took some time. But we do it because we're not tolerant of this. And, you know, given a choice, the American people would rather have a system in which we disagree with each other non-violently than one in which we, you know, shoot at each other.
So I just want to say one thing. I can only speak for myself, but I think others, maybe here and elsewhere, I was outraged and disgusted by all of those things. I don't think we should, you know, we need to discourage violence from any sector, any ideology as an answer to our disagreements in democracy. But we certainly need a leader who believes that.
Yeah.
Well, and you know, as
leaders.
We're running out of time,
leaders, absolutely.
But I do want us to try to get as granular as we can about what leadership actually looks like in terms of uniting the country in a moment like this. Because, I mean, let's talk about this responsibly. There are two presidential candidates, but there is one who does actively incite violence, as we saw on January 6th. If he is still captivating, again, one of two major parties in this country, do we have a shot at the sort of leadership or the country coming together?
Sure. You know, don't bet against the American people having good common sense at the end of the day. We're going to have a fight, and somebody's going to win, and somebody's going to lose. And my sense is there will be people on either side. Look, I had to hire a lawyer in 2004 and 2005 because there were 2005 and 2006 because there were election deniers in 2004.
They didn't storm the Capitol, though.
No, they didn't storm the Capitol, but they tried to stop the re-election of George Bush, claiming that computers in Europe transferred 120,000 votes from John Kerry to George Bush. And 37 members of the House of Representatives, led by James Clyburn, bought that nonsense. And I was accused in a court in Columbus, Ohio, of having ordered the assassination of a whistleblower who was going to spill the beans on this computer scandal that had overturned the Ohio election. Now, granted, nowhere close to January 6th, don't get me wrong, but we have paranoia in our society. And this didn't keep George W. Bush saying to John Lewis, let's work together on reauthorizing the Voting Rights Act. But Lewis was one of the people who bought into this, as was Clyburn. So we have to have leaders who say, you know what, let's put some of the politics aside and look at what's best for the country and set the tone from the top.
The thing that I would point out is that John Kerry conceded the election.
Yeah.
Al Gore conceded the election. That's the difference here.
Yeah, I agree with that.
When people speak, it's fundamental. You need to yield to the will of the people. Yeah. And
go tell 37 House Democrats and Barbara Boxer that. I grant you, there's no equivalent to January 6th.
They knew they weren't going to overturn the election.
Yeah, well then,
but the point is, the candidate conceded. Al Gore presided over the vote, the certification of the vote. We need that from our leaders.
Yeah.
What are you worried could happen if Donald Trump loses this election? Do we see January 6th redux, but worse?
No, because this time around, everybody will be forewarned and forearmed. There's no way that there's going to be a January. I mean, they've already designated January 6th when the Congress will meet to receive the results of the Electoral College as a national security event, and so there'll be plenty of preparations. And you know, I also think the good common sense in the American people is not going to stand for it. There's not going to be, hundreds of thousands of people, regardless of who wins or loses, who are going to find themselves making the way to the nation's capital to protest the election. Maybe I'm being childish about that, but naive. But I just think the American people have got more common sense than that. And while a lot of people, I mean, everybody's going to have a chance. This time around, there'll be no excuses. The last time around, Donald Trump objected to the practices that were being put in place because of COVID, but he did so after the fact in 63 lawsuits. This time around, everybody's out there filing the lawsuits and trying to make certain that the laws are applied as they're written. And as a result, we're removing the excuses, and good for that.
I wish I could be as hopeful as Karl is about this, but Trump is, the stakes for Trump are very large in this election. He's already laid the predicate for if I lose it, it'll be because it was stolen. I mean, this is a guy who thinks he won the last debate. So he doesn't accept defeat. And the signals that he sends, are going to be important. I think in the main, the country will rally, but I'm worried about the people on the fringes and people who believe in him, who are not on the fringes, but believe in him as a leader. And if they're told they did it again, I do worry about that. And particularly because I think this is going to be another very close election.
Well, on that, remarkably,
I should answer first and let Mr. Sunshine go second.
No, but all of
He's such a loser, total loser.
Okay.
In fact, both of them are. Rove and Axelrod, total losers.
I do think both of you may have ruined your respective careers by speaking so highly of each other frequently.
It's Chatham House rules. You can't tell anybody.
Yes.
Okay, yeah.
It's okay for me,
Outside
but
these
not
walls,
for him.
I hate the guy.
Yeah.
I'm glad
We even
to
took
end
our wives
on
to Rome together.
laughing note.
Very expensive.
Thank you guys so much. This
Thank
was
you.
fantastic.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Still to come on the Ideas stage, Jamie Dimon. And now, please welcome Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer. And here to lead the conversation is Atlantic contributor Jemele Hill.
Well, hello everybody. Thanks for coming. You guys are in trouble because you have two Michigan State graduates here, two Michiganders, and of course I'm representing the wonderful city of Detroit, which I can tell you they love this governor. Because we were together, and I guess it would have been in March for the NAACP Freedom Fund dinner. And this is no disrespect to the mayor of Detroit, but your ovation was so loud compared to his. I was like, oh, I didn't realize this was the city of Gretchen Whitmer. But in case you guys haven't read it, I highly advise you read her book, True Gretch, What I've Learned About Life, Leadership, and Everything in Between, which we'll be discussing that as well as some pertinent campaign issues. First thing, though, I want to ask you about, and maybe this alone to me should be a Democratic campaign ad. Your ex-husband was your campaign photographer.
Uh-huh.
All right, I see the second gentleman's ex-wife is like his biggest supporter. What is it that Democrats know about getting along with your exes that the rest of us clearly have not discovered?
Well, I think, especially if you got kids in a marriage, raising those kids got to be top priority. And so when my first husband and I divorced, we were both absolutely committed to making sure that we stayed friendly, and I think his wife is fantastic. And so I love seeing Mamala, out on the campaign, because so many of us are blended families. So many of us have multiple generations that can help. And if they do, we're really fortunate to have that. And so keeping everyone focused on what matters is really important, and not burning bridges. My mom often said, you'll never regret being kind. And I have found so many times in my life that someone I met, decades ago will pop back in, and it's like you never regret being kind. And that team of raising a family or trying to, solve problems is really important. And I love it when someone comes to town and I'm like, that's the father of my children. And they look at me and they're like, no. Oh, yeah, really? That is. And so when I thanked him in my election night when I won, a lot of people were scratching their heads, but it's good to have a team. I'm lucky.
Yeah, again, I aspire to be not as petty as you are. I aspire, for sure. Now, obviously, a lot of us have seen the polls. We know this is a very close presidential race, particularly close in our home state of Michigan. Now, Michigan has the first and only majority Arab city in Dearborn. Largest Arab population in the country, 8th largest Palestinian population. During the Democratic primary, when Joe Biden was still in the race, you know, there were over 100,000 that voted uncommitted because of this administration's policy when it comes to Israel. What message can Kamala Harris send to sway uncommitted voters, particularly those in Michigan?
Well, I think, you know, one of the things so I wrote the book because I knew this was going to be a hard year, a heavy political year. And the question I get asked the most, whether I'm in Michigan or traveling outside of the state, is how do you stay positive? You know, a pandemic, 28 recall attempts, a plot to kidnap and kill you. Like, why do you want to keep doing this? And it's an understandable question. Maybe it's unreasonable to still love my job after all this, but I do. And I wanted to put some things that I've learned out there to help people have a little inspiration in this heavy year, or to have a laugh at my expense. And there's a lot of things that I share in there that maybe you wouldn't expect a politician to lead with. I didn't shoot any dogs, so don't worry. It's not, it's not a Kristi Noem book. My dogs are prominent, but I love them. The thing is, you know, one of the most important tools that I have is the ability to listen. Michigan has this rich diversity. We are a microcosm of the country because people came from around the globe for a job on the auto line. You can get right into the middle class, take care of your family, even get a second place up north and enjoy the beautiful outdoors in Michigan. And that's why we have this huge Arab population and Muslim population and Palestinian population. And it's important to recognize all three because they're not monolithic. This is a community that's really hurting. Our Jewish community is really hurting too. It has been painful with hostages and attacks and the continuous violence. I have a massive Lebanese population, and many are worried about their loved ones with the most recent, you know, with the news in the last couple of days. I think that Vice President Harris has done a really good job of reaching out, recognizing the pain that everyone's feeling, articulating support, however, also a vision for the future, for peace and for rebuilding. And I think both those things have to happen. If you do one without the other, you run the risk that a group of people, an important group of people, are going to tune out or you know, not see that you see them as well. And I think she's doing that well. Listening is really important in this job, and I think she has done a lot of that as well over her career, and that's why she's focused on what matters to Americans.
You mentioned the plot to kidnap and kill you, which you do have some funny moments in the book in terms of discussing that. But what I found to be really interesting is that you said that you wanted to meet one of the men who was a part of this plot. Did that ever happen?
No, there still are appeals that are happening.
Right.
And so there were 14 men who were plotting to kidnap and kill me during the pandemic. You know, lots of governors dealt with people, you know, demonstrating, showing up, making threats, but I don't think there was anything like that other than what we had in Michigan. 330 million people in this country. There were 14 who thought a reasonable reaction was to pick up guns and threaten the woman who's telling them to wear a mask. I'd like to understand why. What was going on in their lives? Is there something I can learn that'll make me a better governor or make me a better human being? Maybe it wouldn't be a good use of my time, but I would like to try to understand.
I was going to say, what in your mind, how did you see that conversation going? Like, what did you want to say to them? I mean, I wasn't even trying to be funny. I'm just like, okay. So now somebody tried to kill you. Interesting.
Let's be clear. I don't want to sit with all 14 at the same time, right? There were a couple that cooperated with the government, who showed remorse, who testified against their fellow co-conspirators. That's who I'd like to talk to. I just like, you know, I quote Ted Lasso in the book. It's very heavy intellectually book, so you'll enjoy it. I seek to understand. You know, I think about what Bobby Kennedy said when Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated, trying to understand. And that's really something that if there was something going on in their lives that maybe I can be helpful with for other Michiganders, then there's benefit to that. And so I'd like to try, but my Attorney General, Dana Nessel, keeps telling me I got to wait till all the appeals are exhausted.
Okay. One of the other things that you write in the book that I thought was, that really stood out was, how saying I'm sorry is a superpower, right? Has there been a moment during your 2 terms as governor where you should have apologized and you didn't?
I think that maybe I should have apologized faster on occasion in my life and in my career. Recognizing the pain that business was going through during the pandemic. I had a good friend who said, you're doing all the right things and we support you, but there are a lot of business people who are really worried that they're not going to make it through this pandemic. And if you could just acknowledge that more would be helpful. Don't change your policies, but recognize that we're asking everyone who's making sacrifice here. And I thought that was really helpful feedback. I'm not always right. I'm a human being. I am not an epidemiologist. I am not, a medical doctor. I was trying to do get the best information I could from the finest experts there are and make decisions to keep people safe. But certainly, I think that's something that was a helpful observation that someone shared with me that I ended up doing as well.
Now, you did, became a bit of a controversy there because there was a photo of you gathering during when you had these very strict sort of orders about people staying home, people, following the social distancing rules. Sorry, I laughed out loud because you were at the Land Shark. And I was like, so the Land Shark, for people who do not know, it's a dive bar on our college campus at Michigan State. And the number
it's not somewhere you're proud to go when you're in college.
It is not. And that's why I was like, so of all the places to get caught up in a controversy, I was like, the Land Shark. Hopefully you were having a shark bowl.
I shared it because, I was doing everything I could to follow the orders. There was no one else in the bar. And a couple friends said, let's move these tables together. And I didn't think about it. And and someone posted a picture. One of my friends posted a picture. And of course I got roasted for it. Understandably so. Right. And I acknowledged it because I do think, I'm a human being. I am not perfect. And when I screw up, I try to acknowledge it and apologize for it.
Now, as I mentioned at the top of our conversation, is that you're very beloved in the city of Detroit. And one of the ways we know this is because we gave you the nickname Big Gretch. Yep. Started by a rapper who wrote a whole song about it. Most women do not like to be referred to as big anything, right? Now, Detroit is 77% Black, and as I mentioned, they've really, the residents, all residents, not just the Black residents, have really embraced you. What does that mean to you that the largest city in Michigan has this kind of affection for you?
It means, I can't tell you how much it means to me. Like, it's really kindness that I needed at a really hard time. When, early in the pandemic, when Donald Trump singled me out, I was the one who was on television, and I had observed correctly that there was not a national strategy. And we governors were told, I'm not a shipping clerk, go find it on your own for masks and gloves for our doctors and nurses. Detroit, Chicago, New Orleans, and New York were all on fire with COVID. We had refrigerated trucks outside of our hospitals because so many people had died from COVID, and we didn't have a place for them. It was horrible. And so I was trying to get some help by being on the national news, saying, we need masks, we need gloves, can you help us? And Donald Trump got mad, and he singled me out, and I started getting death threats, and I started getting my Republican legislature started suing me to take away my powers, and all the recall attempts started, and I was really feeling low and lonely because I didn't care that he called me that woman from Michigan. What I cared was maybe he'd be so petty as to withhold things that I really needed for my people, and that was my big concern. And all of a sudden, I was doing one of my pretty regular briefings, and a woman, Shaquila Myers, who works with me, she's from Detroit, said, they're calling you Big Gretch. And I was like, huh? What is that? I'm named after both my grandmas, Gretchen and Esther. And Grandma Gretchen always said, never let anyone shorten your name. Gretch rhymes with wretch, and it's not pretty. So you are Gretchen. Always insist on that. And so I've always kind of had an aversion to being called Gretchen. Like you said, I don't know many women that want big on the front of their nickname either. So I was like, what does this mean? And Shaquila said, you don't understand, Governor. The people have accepted you. They love you. And they've bestowed this on you. It's like you just got a key to the city of Detroit. That's what the nickname is. And so my grandmother's rolling over in her grave, but I just love being called Big Gretch now.
Though your official key to the city was the Cartier buffs. That was your key to the city, which is very, very Detroit. Let's talk about your time that you've had there. I mean, in November 2022, you won your second term by a landslide, 11%. For the first time in 40 years, Michigan Democrats have pretty much run the table, control the House, you have the Senate, and obviously having the governor's office. And so far in your second term, you've signed bipartisan legislation repealing the state's 1931 law banning abortion without exceptions for rape or incest. You signed a tax credit for yes, very important. You signed a tax credit for low-wage workers and rolled back the state's retirement tax, and you signed a package of expansive gun violence prevention bills, which included universal background checks for all firearms. Now, even though these all sound like very reasonable things, we're in a time where such progressive legislation is looked at negatively or very polarizing. So how were you able to accomplish all that in a time where our political climate is as divisive as it is?
Well, none of it was easy, and it took a long time to get to this point. I served in the legislature since the year 2000 for the most part of through 2014, and I was in the minority the whole time. Got my teeth kicked in on policy fights every single day. But when we changed gerrymandering and ran on abortion and ran on this agenda, we flipped both chambers of the legislature for the first time in 40 years, as you said. That's a big deal. It also is a one-seat majority in both chambers. So it's not like an overwhelming majority, but here's what I believe. When people hire you to lead and elect you by almost 11 points, they expect you to deliver on the agenda. And so I've worked very closely with my legislature to make sure that we delivered on these things. We also finally got Michigan on the right side of civil rights for the LGBTQ+ community. We feed 1.4 million Michigan kids breakfast and lunch at school every day in Michigan. So I think if Democrats want the people to elect them to lead, they got to do it when they get there. And so I take with responsibility not just my commitment to the people of Michigan and the agenda I ran on, but to show the people across the country that when Democrats lead, we can build an economy that it thrives and where people can get ahead and that there is justice under the law and real opportunity for everyone.
And you are fixing the damn roads, because the last time I was in Detroit, it took me about 3 hours to drive to Grand Rapids. Of all the construction, I was like, oh, she really is fixing the damn roads around
I know, I tell people, I know you're cursing me under your breath, but you're welcome.
Yeah, I didn't have polite thoughts, but I was like, this is for the betterment of the state here for sure. Now, one of the defining moments of your political career is when you made the courageous step to share a very personal story about how you were sexually assaulted while in college, and you shared this story on the Michigan State Senate floor. Despite you sharing this story, the bill that was in question about requiring extra health insurance for abortion coverage regardless of the circumstances, which essentially was asking women to have rape insurance, basically,
yep.
That bill still passed. However, you obviously as governor have been able to advance Michigan forward with what you signed in terms of abortion. But what would it take in your mind to sort of legalize abortion nationwide?
Well, that's got to be the goal. And I think one of the great things we were able to accomplish in Michigan in 2022 was to amend our Constitution to protect abortion rights. And then as governor, I've signed all these repeal of trap laws that made it harder for women to access health care. But I'm also working really hard to remind people that this isn't over. This is in a state like Michigan where we now have codified these rights. They're still in jeopardy based on what happens in this national election, based on who's on the court, based on what lawsuits are brought, based on who's in Congress. And so reminding people how important this is. We need a national standard. Roe was a national standard. People say, under what conditions? Roe had conditions. We need the Roe standard again, and that's what I support. That's what I'm advocating for, that we have this right codified for all women across this country, because the heartbreaking stories that have come out of Georgia just in the last few days, and the mom of Amber who was with us last night with Oprah and the vice president in metropolitan Detroit, those stories are going to happen over and over again in states where there is not access, and we're depriving kids of their moms, we're depriving women of opportunity, and just to be a full American with the ability to make your own decisions about your life, your body, and your future. It's still very much at stake. And so that's why this presidential is so incredibly important.
Along those same lines, because to some degree, I feel like when you hear enough the threat to democracy, those kinds of things, sometimes it becomes a little bit of white noise for people. But explain to folks out there who are watching in this audience what concerns you the most about a possible Trump reelection.
I
know it's a long list, and I know we only have so much time. But
I'm very concerned. I'm thinking, I'm thinking about just the stories that we heard in the last couple of days about women across the country. I'm thinking about having confidence in our democracy and our institutions that have sustained this democracy since the beginning of this country. I'm thinking about our standing in the world and our homeland security and safety, what it means when you have someone in power who is untethered to their constitutional duties, who doesn't answer to anyone but themselves, and is going to be focused on using all those sweeping powers that have now been even greater because of the Supreme Court to settle scores or to help himself. And I think it's a very concerning time. I think about my daughters who are 22 and 20 years old. One is a gay woman. Both of them expect to have the ability to create the life they want in this country. And I worry about what that looks like, from everything from climate to gun safety in this country. So it's hard to say one thing, but I do think that the incredible damage that could be done with 4 years of the former president again is devastating. That's why I'm working so hard to support Kamala Harris and Tim Walz.
You know your state, you know your voters. So what do Vice President Harris and Tim Walz have to do, you think, to win the state of Michigan?
I think they're doing it, and I think we just got to keep doing it, showing up as they are. Kamala Harris is a regular person. She's an exceptional person, but she's lived a regular life. She took care of a mom who was sick, just like I did, just like so many people did. She worked an hourly job to get through school, just like so many of us have. Tim Walz is the same. These people have walked in our shoes and lived our lives, and that's why we can trust that they will focus on the things that'll make our lives better. I think about Donald Trump's existence, and I wonder, has he ever even been into a grocery store, much less taken something out of the cart because we saw how it was adding up, Has he ever gassed up a car, or attended a parent-teacher conference, or taken care of a parent who was sick and put their chemo pills in order for them to make their lives a little easier as they're going through treatment? Many of us have lived these kinds of lives, and that's why we need leaders who get it, who care about us, who understand what our pressures are every day and use the power of that office to make our lives easier and a little bit better going forward.
There were so many jokes I could have made there about Trump in a grocery store, but I'm just going to move on and try to be professional. Obviously, you experienced this firsthand when Donald Trump singled you out, and obviously what happened with that plot to assassinate you as well. We see what has happened with him in terms of being the target of a couple of assassination attempts. What can be done to tone down or somehow get a handle on the harsh sort of political violence that is happening right now? Is it all about what we're saying about politicians? What can be done so we can ramp down some of this political stuff?
I think an overwhelming rejection of that ugliness at the ballot box this fall. Everything comes back down to November 5th and what's going to happen in this election. If it is close, or if a Trump-Vance administration occurs, I believe it will get worse. If they are resoundingly defeated, I believe the Republican Party, and I hope the Republican Party, will rebuild with some integrity. We need parties that can have robust debates on the same set of facts. We need parties that can see the humanity in one another, and while we differ on a set of policy issues, that we don't denigrate one another and inspire people to hurt one another. It's been so jarring for me to see this violence that has now been turned on him to all of a sudden get called out when they've been stoking it for years. I have been for 4 years saying we've got to bring down the temperature, and I'm glad to hear Mike Johnson say that in Congress now. but there wasn't anyone saying it when it was focused on just Democrats. I'm not suggesting that it's okay when it's focused on one or another. It's never okay. And we've all got to be a part of making sure that we reaffirm that we hold people accountable, especially within our own party when it's someone who should be held accountable and to account.
One of the best stories you tell in the book is the Shark Week story, yeah, right? I don't want to ruin it, because I want you guys to read it. But as a result of that Shark Week story, because you write Shark Week on your notes, right? To remind yourself of your empowerment, your fierceness. And I think you mentioned in the book that you got a shark tattoo. Is that correct?
I did, yeah.
Where is the infamous tattoo?
None of your business. It's right here.
I was hoping you would. It's right there?
Yes.
Oh, okay. I was hoping you would tell me what it was. But just as a woman in politics, you know that you're under a different level of scrutiny. Vice President Harris knows this. Any woman in politics knows this. So how do you handle the fact that there are a different set of rules for you as opposed to your male counterparts?
Well, it's a bummer because it shouldn't be the case, but it's also a strength because I look at someone like Kamala Harris and I know her road has not been easy, and she has become an incredibly skilled advocate and leader because of the challenges that she's uniquely had to face. She's head and shoulders, I think, more prepared to take on this role than many who've come before her, and certainly than the person she's matched up against in this election. The Shark Week story is the last chapter in the book, and it's called The Happy Warrior. And when I was running for governor the first time, Emily's List sent me a debate coach to work with me as I prepared for this debate, and my first debate. They sent a male speech coach, which I thought was funny, from Emily's List for a female, but whatever. But he was great. He gave me some wonderful tips. One of the things he said was the happy warrior always wins the debate. And I know you saw in the last debate where people kept saying, if you turn off the volume, look who looks like they're having the most fun. That's the test. The happy warrior. And Kamala Harris was the happy warrior. Now, it dovetails into this longer story about Shark Week, and it's hilarious. And I hope that you will buy the book and read it and maybe give it to young people who are coming up, because I do think that there are some good lessons in there that younger people will get a kick out of too. But it's about, recognizing, yes, there's hard, tough work ahead. But you can find joy in the work too. You can find a laugh, and even on the hardest days. And I think that's part of what people are responding to in the Harris Walz campaign, the joy of it. That yes, these are not easy days that they are having, and there won't be easy days while they lead, but there is joy in the work. And that's what I love about this role.
I'm going to close out our conversation by asking you a question I asked the vice president when I interviewed her when she was running for president before Joe Biden eventually became the president. What is your favorite cuss word and why?
Well, I wasn't going to go into the Shark Week thing, but yeah, when I say Shark Week, it's followed up by motherfucker. And buy the book and you'll understand why. I talk like normal people talk. I'm not, erudite, and I'm not, always trying to make sure that I am, flushing my pearls and, perfect. I'm not perfect. But in the book, under the How to Listen, Why Listening's a Superpower, there's a woman named Bridget Bonds from Detroit, or from Flint, Michigan, African-American woman. I met her in Detroit at the Children's Hospital. And I had been asking people, if I'm lucky enough to get elected, what can I do that'll make your life better? And all over Michigan, people kept saying, fix the damn roads, fix the damn roads. Like, if you'd have asked me would I run on the saying, fix the damn roads, I would have thought you were out of your mind. Until I got into all 83 counties, and that's what people kept saying. Mm-hmm. Well, I'm talking to this woman whose son is in a brace at the Children's Hospital, and I say the same thing. If I'm lucky enough to get elected, what could I do that'll make your life better? And she said, fix the damn roads. And I did not expect that. So I said, okay, tell me more. Why? Why is this? And she explained on her drive from Flint to Detroit to every day back and forth, she hit a pothole that busted the rim on her wheel. And it was a whole day off the road. She didn't see her son in the hospital that day. She left her other kids at home with a babysitter. She just spent a bunch of money out of rent or child care to fix that car and get back on the road. And for me, it crystallized when the fundamentals aren't working, it's the people that are living on the bubble that pay the dearest price for it. And the most important part of it was the time with her son who needed her. And so, I guess damn is a has played a big role in my life too. But fix the damn roads or Shark Week.
Yeah.
You'll understand.
Well, if it makes you feel a deeper kinship with the vice president, her favorite cuss word is also motherfucker. and as she said, the one that ends in an A.
Yeah,
not the
starts
ER.
with an M and ends with
Starts
an
with an M, ends with an A. Thank you, Governor, for joining us here at the Athletics Festival. Thank you all.
And now for a conversation about the global economy, please welcome Chairman and CEO of JPMorgan Chase, Jamie Dimon. Here to lead the conversation is the Atlantic's editor-in-chief, Jeffrey Goldberg.
Thank you. Good morning. Nice to see all of you again. And again, it's been a great program so far, and we're going to continue having a great program with Jamie Dimon. Thank you very much for being here at the Atlantic Festival. We appreciate it. I don't want to talk about Fed rates for very long because my knowledge base will be exhausted, and
it's also really boring.
2.5 minutes, and it's also incredibly boring. Yeah. But I do want to ask you what you think of the rate cut, and if you think the rate cut is going to have some sort of possibly dramatic impact on the election in 47 days.
Yeah, so first of all, thrilled to be here, and thank you for spending time with me. Look, I think it's a minor kind of thing, okay? It's a lot of chatter, a lot more talk and hot breath. They did it. I think they should have, 50 basis points. Hopefully we're on the way to a soft landing. I wouldn't count my eggs. And I think this one particular thing, all things being equal, has almost no effect on the election.
No effect?
No effect.
No effect.
I think most Americans, literally, there's 320 million Americans. If you probably surveyed them, only 5% would know about it.
And there won't be, you won't feel the impact before the election.
You've already had, like, mortgage rates, you've already had that come down a little bit. But that had actually happened prior to the rate cut.
Right. Talk a little bit about inflation and if you believe it's definitively over, and talk about your possible worries about recession coming.
Yeah. So I know we're going to talk about geopolitics. I think that's far more important than soft landing, mild hard landing, things like that, and recession. Look,
Are you editing you're editing me already?
A little bit, yeah.
All right.
No, we don't know. And I think people spend too much time on short-term data and guessing the future. Most people can't guess it. The economy is enormously complex. 160 million people go to work every day. They worry about their families and their friends. Trillions of dollars moves around the world. Investments move all over the place. That's the economy. The Fed changes rates, but underneath that, there's an economy which is getting stronger, getting weaker. I hope we have a soft landing. I'm a little more skeptical than other people. So I give it lower odds, but I hope it's true. And I also am a little more skeptical that inflation is going to go away so easily. Not because it hasn't come down, it has, and it can come down more, it might, but because there's a lot of things in the future which are inflationary, okay? And I'm not talking about next year, but the deficits are huge, those are inflationary. The green economy is inflationary. The remilitarization of the world is inflationary. The restructuring of global trade is inflationary. Demographics is inflationary. I don't see the massive offsets to that. So we may have gone from a lower rate, lower inflation, to a slightly higher rate, higher inflation down the road. Whatever it is, we'll deal with it. Economies are used to dealing with that. It's not a disaster. It's just, it's just different than we had in the past.
How much power does a president have over the direction of the economy, actually?
If you look at it in the short run, almost none. So people have studied this. When a president's elected, what happens to the economy in the next 12 months? The economy is like a tanker. It's going, and it's not going to change. But they do have an effect in a longer period. So policy really matters. So when you look at that, you got to look at the more long run. So you do want presidents who have policy that's conducive to growth, and so it doesn't matter in the short run, but probably not the long run. This may be an exception. So just because what I said is true doesn't mean it's true this time. I don't know this time. I think this time it may be more consequential in the short run.
I want to get to America's place in the world as quickly as possible, but I do want to introduce it by talking about the upcoming race. You recently said something that was controversial, at least controversial in certain circles, where you said that Trump was, quote, kind of right about immigration and kind of right about NATO. You could pick either one and address it first, immigration and NATO.
But my point is, but I still feel 74 million people voted for him. And, there's a lot of gaslighting and scapegoating and stuff like that. And people impugn why they did it. You shouldn't do that. And I think what I was trying to make the point is I don't think we should be insulting any of our citizens at all, though I obviously don't like certain things, but that immigration was a problem. I don't like how he dealt with it, but it was a problem. He acknowledged it. China was a problem. There was a shift in policy. He acknowledged it. The economy grew. He reduced regulations. He was pro-business. There are reasons why people voted for him, which aren't because of his character. And so I was just making that point. That's all I'm saying. I still feel that way. You got to treat I think you should treat all citizens with respect. And if you're running for somebody, try to get their votes. At least try to understand why they're voting for that person.
You're referring to, and you've talked about this in the past, the mistake of referring to Trump voters as deplorable, for instance, or other kind of broad stroke. What's your anxiety about that? Just that it's demonization?
I think it is demonization. I think people should stop it, whether you're on the left or the right. And it leads to bad outcomes. If you could travel around the country, people feel very differently about some of these policies. And one of your guys, James Fowler, wrote the book. We went to 50 small cities, and I do bus trips every year. And this year we're in Seattle and Omaha and Bentonville, St. Louis. And there's innovation, people working together. They're not obsessed with everything people are obsessed with in New York City, San Francisco, and D.C. And they're working together. And they're not angry at each other. They're building parks. And they're trying to get jobs in place. And they're trying to help the local community. So I just think it's a better attitude. Collaboration, help people, try to make things better. I just saw Governor Whitmer, try to make Detroit better. You're not going to make these cities better if you yell at each other. And Mayor Duggan, who did a great job there. The governor did a great job there. They bring in business, not-for-profit, civic society, government, and they try to attack the problems. The problems are homeless, streets, crime, schools, jobs, health, and those are problems. Those problems are not Democrat or Republican. And I don't think people should be weaponized by those types of things. They should try to look at the problems and come up with a policy that actually works.
Let me ask you this about something you said that Trump was good for business. One of your roles, the role of any CEO of a large company, a large bank especially, is to think about tail risk, right? Isn't it risky to have a president of the United States, risky to business, among other things, who doesn't adhere to democratic norms? I mean, doesn't the world look at us and think, wow, if they're so unstable as to have a January 6th event, maybe that's not great for business?
I'm not going to comment about very specific things like that. He was pro-business, and it was good for business. Yes, there are risks to all the things that happen for any kind of president. So I agree with that concept. And we look at all fat tails, trying to make sure we can handle all of them. And we're not going to elect the president. You guys are going to elect the president, and we have to deal with this as a business. And my view is always serve your client through all of that. I have to deal with all of that. But yes, that his views and stuff may create more uncertainty in the world. And I travel the whole world, by the way, and I get to hear from business around the world and presidents and prime ministers what they think about specific issues. And sometimes I share that when I come back with people here. But
you have a I don't want to say apocalyptic view of where we're heading. It's not apocalyptic at all. But you have expressed this publicly, that you're very worried about the direction we're taking, mainly because of polarization, but not only because of polarization. If you had to identify the 3 or 4 undercurrents that worry you the most, could you lay that out?
My view is not apocalyptic, but you're talking about geopolitics.
Well, no, I'm just talking about...
I don't think America's apocalyptic, because I think America is hugely resilient. It's innovation, it's growing, it's a blessed land, with food, water, energy, the freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom of enterprise. That's still true. It's still true everywhere. And if you opened up our borders to the whole world, 4 billion people would come here. I don't like the demonization of America. I think we could acknowledge our flaws, but also celebrate the beauty of this country, which most people who don't live here understand. And they believe me, they would come here if they could. So I don't have any apocalyptic view of the United States. I always want leadership which is mature and decent. I've written about this in the Washington Post. That you talk to each other.
I'm not familiar with that publication. I'm sorry. I'll look it up.
I would have put in the Atlantic too if I could, but
one day you'll graduate. Yeah. But go into this a little bit. But first of all, start back a little bit. You're the grandson of immigrants, not even high school educated.
Greek immigrant, mostly Greek, yeah.
Talk about what it is that you think, because we do have this crisis of confidence and purpose in this country that spans parties. Talk about what it is that makes you optimistic about not only the idea of America, but how we're functioning. Because this piece in that aforementioned newspaper was a warning. I mean, it was a warning about dysfunction.
It was a warning more about geopolitics and what we need to do here to help the world stay safe and free for democracy. And so the country, if you travel the world, you don't have what we have here. And we got food, water, energy, the Atlantic, the Pacific, great neighbors, and we should treat them respectfully in Mexico and Canada. Okay, then we've got the gifts of our founding fathers: freedom of speech, freedom of religion, and freedom of enterprise. And the value of freedom is extraordinary. The arguments, ideas, generation. You look at all these autocratic nations, that's what they fall down on. They can't talk, the boss wants X, they can't innovate. You guys can buy what you want, move what you want, do what you want, say what you want. You can't do that in a lot of countries. And so this is the safest nation on the planet, and it's a very moral nation. And now, we have flaws. I've always acknowledged them. Like we've done a terrible job to 20% lower income in our society. They're dying younger. They go to crime-ridden neighborhoods. When I listen to all my liberal friends talk about it, I acknowledge this. But their schools aren't graduating their kids. They're dying 10 years younger. Their incomes didn't go up for 20 years. How the hell did that happen in America? We did a terrible job. And I go through immigration and taxation and regulation and healthcare and pensions. We screwed up. But no, we don't admit it. So I'm not saying we're perfect, but the good stuff is unbelievable. My grandparents came. This country was a beacon of freedom and light. And what these people do to get here is extraordinary.
Why did they come?
It was World War I. They wanted to escape. There was poverty. They couldn't get opportunities, so they came to the land of opportunity. But it's like a lot of your parents and grandparents and great-grandparents, that's what they did. And I think we've got to teach our own people here what that stands for. Freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom of enterprise. The actual freedoms you have are extraordinary. If you don't believe me, take a trip to me with parts of the world, where people can't say what they want. You don't have freedom of the press, really. You can't really do things or buy things. There's a lot of caste societies. People are afraid. There's much more rampant crime. So we should celebrate that and start fixing our problems. I think some of those problems, by the way, cause the populism. And if you travel to inner cities, which I go to, and rural areas I go to, you'll hear their view of it. And they don't think everything Washington is doing is fixing it. And they think that actually it didn't help them. And that Washington's giving a lot of gifts out to their family and friends. And so we have to be a little more respectful of what didn't work here. Like if your kids were going to schools where even if they graduated, they had to go, I'm not going to say it's bad, stock shelves, when they could have had a job making $60,000 a year as a coder or planner or finance person or program management, because we don't educate them about livelihood. We worry about whether you can do math in 8th grade, which I think is good, but I think we should change the purpose of education. You leave learning about life and you have a livelihood. And that should be true for high schools. That should be true for community colleges. And in those high schools, we should teach nutrition and wellness, which we don't. And we should teach financial education, like saving money. And so my view about America is the greatest country in the world, but I do talk about the problems that we should fix. Forget all the mistakes, don't forget them. But let's go, what are we going to do going forward that makes it better? And so,
how did, from your perspective, how did Washington go off the rails? What were the mechanisms that created the dysfunction that keep these problems from being solved here?
Look, I don't know really, we've always had this. When you look at our democracy, there have been terrible times of democracy. You had Joe McCarthy. You had our Civil War. You had all these terrible things. You also had leaders who come forward and take us forward. I personally believe one of the main drivers is the bottom 25% of society were in fact left behind. When they're dying 10 years longer, they're going to crime-ridden neighborhoods, being lectured to by New Yorkers in San Francisco and Washington, D.C., and their schools aren't working, their health care is worse. I think that caused it. You know, I call it the fraying of the American dream. They didn't have the same opportunity. And they did see a lot of the world get very rich, you know, and so, yeah, they're a little pissed off. And I think that caused various types of populism, both the left and the right, by the way.
You've mentioned this twice, this San Francisco, Washington, and New York, and the lectures. Give us, what are people hearing from these cities that they don't like, and what are people in these cities doing that's wrong?
It was the quotes, you know, where they're hanging on to their beers, their Bible, and their guns. Really? Is that okay? Of course it's okay. Deplorables, because they think differently. So, you know, the disrespect they feel when you go to some of these places from, you know, the elite, and it's that kind of thing. And so, you know, it's a general thing. I'm not sure it's the reason we have populism, but it's been going on for a long time. But I think the real reason is we left them behind. We left them behind. Most of you don't even drive through their part of town. You don't even know what it looks like. And, you know, so, you know, a company like JPMorgan, you know, we have community branches in Harlem and Crenshaw and South Side of Chicago, and they're enormously productive. People like it. They actually go, and we try to relate to the community. There are fixes. You can list any problem, there are fixes. And we spend very little time talking about policies that work, why they work. You can look around the world and find health policies, pension policies, education policies that actually worked. And then you can look at ours, and they actually didn't. And very often we laugh at it. You know, it takes 12 years to rebuild a broken bridge. I don't think it's funny. Just take 2. You know, and how did that happen? Bureaucracy, complacency, stultifying rules and regulations. And so we better get fixing it, because we could make it worse. And I think, and again, I'm optimistic. I think we will fix it, but it's going to take a lot of elbow grease.
How would you actually fix it? I mean, I know you're not launching your candidacy for the presidency on the stage, but how would you actually fix it?
Well, look, my role at JPMorgan, and what we try to do is, so we do things as JPMorgan to help communities, the black community, Hispanic community. We help the rich community. We help countries and sovereign wealth.
The rich community.
We reach out to, we bank everybody. And so it's important that we do that. And we do work skills. We hire disabled. We hire vets. We hire neurologically disabled. We hire autistic. We hire second chance citizens. You know, we have school programs. We do a lot of great stuff. But the most important thing is policy at the federal level. And I think at the state level. So that James Fallow book is like very local policies. They work. Detroit, it works. But the federal policy is more important. If they can get education policy, pension policy, health care, immigration, if we can get those policies right, mortgages, affordable housing, that will do more than, you know, individual companies, you know, attacking these problems. So we spend a lot of time on actual policy. What affordable housing policies work? What mortgage policies work? What education policies work? And then we're willing to get in the fight on immigration. If it ever comes in front of Congress, you know, we all want to get, you know, a real immigration laws out there that work, including the one that was, you know, recently not done. But so we try to get involved in the fight. It's very frustrating.
But what you're, I don't think anybody would disagree with you that better policies would lead to better outcomes. But the question is, there's a chasm right now between what you're saying should be done and the seeming ability of Washington to do it. So let's peer into that. Have you peer into that chasm for a minute and say, all right, how do you get politicians, or how do you build a political system that gets the politicians that would actually work on these problems?
There are a lot of politicians, Democrat, Republican, Senator, Congress folks, they're good. They want to answer this. They want to fix it. You know, it's a little, you know, controlled out there by other things. So to me, I don't know what to do. I don't know the fix except to give it elbow grease. I'm not the kind of person who throws my hands up and says, I'm not going to do it. I think we need to get involved. I think business need to get involved. Civic society needs to get involved. People to talk to people. I talk to the unions. I talk to the left. I talk to the right. That's how, it's the only way I know. If you look at our best leaders, you know, in life, Abe Lincoln, Eisenhower, Clinton, that's what they did. And yes, they still had the, you know, democracy's tough. It's just better than all other forms, you know. So,
you believe that Bill Clinton was the last president, if I'm not mistaken, who actually was effective in a centrist, bipartisan way. Is that fair?
I would say it's an overstatement. I think that George Bush was effective in some ways that way, and Obama was effective in some ways that way. I think Biden was effective in some ways that way. Trump, they're probably examples too. So it's not a binary thing. I do think, in the Ike Eisenhower book, and I wrote about this in the Washington Post, that he made it a point.
Thank you very much for coming. We're going to see you at the.
But I'm going to talk about the press in a second. So that he made it a point.
Well, I'm looking forward to that.
He made it a point to meet with the opposition leaders. It was written by his daughter. It's called How Ike Led. It was weekly or bi-weekly for lunch or dinner. I think every president should do that. I mean, I don't know how you could be president. You're elected president for the people of the United States. You don't sit down with the other side. What's in your mind? Why do you believe that?
Let me ask you.
We have the same values. I mean, we have a lot of the same values. We want to get more jobs and get people healthier, and it doesn't matter whether you like them or not. It doesn't matter whether you like their views or not.
But something's changed in politics, though. You're not grappling with the. I'll give you an example. So famously, aides to President Obama went to him at a certain point and said, what you should really do is you should really have Mitch McConnell over for a drink. And Obama turned and said, no, you have a drink with Mitch McConnell. I don't know. But Mitch McConnell stated publicly, to be fair to President Obama, he said that his number one goal was not to build policies, economic policies or health policies. Number one goal was to defeat Barack Obama. So this sounds like very
I find it unbelievable that you actually think that has any meaning whatsoever.
No.
For the Senate leader to say, my goal is to beat the other party, well, of course that's their goal.
But
the Giants want to beat the Jets.
No.
It makes no difference.
But McConnell was saying that I will subvert legislative efforts that I agree with.
Whatever it is, I would have met with the guy. I don't care what he says or how he says. That's me. So you all can do what you want. The next president can do whatever they want. I would meet with the guy, and I do it all the time. That's what I would do. And so, I remember there's a famous story where they were impeaching Clinton. Some of his legislative folks didn't want to go to the Hill. They're impeaching you, Mr. President. And Clinton said to them, go to the Hill and get it done. That's what you do. You have a job to do. It doesn't matter what your feelings are hurt. And so I just feel differently about that. Maybe I'm wrong, and maybe it's impossible. But I think it's very important for all of us that you do that. And so I have an idea for the press. Ready?
No.
I may do this myself when I have time. Okay. I'm going to call it like a day 2 press thing, where right now when you read about in the press, and we need a free and open press, and I never get mad at them I do call them up and tell them they were stupid sometimes, but it's the day 2 thing. So we read about student lending, you read about IRS. We need $80 billion for the IRS. We need $80 billion. They want it. We got it. I'm like, really? They never even mention how much we already spend in the IRS. Whether it's effective. What policies would change? So running a business, very often if you ask me for more money, my first question would be, what do you do with the money you already got? Because usually there's bureaucracy, complacency, stupidity, regulations that make it ineffective, and you never read it. Like student lending, we're constantly lending out money. We're going to lose $500 billion. And I understand that people who were mistreated should be given some debt forgiveness, but that should be described to you, not just everybody. A lot of people got, this is the money that's going, 30% of society goes to college. They got what they want. They got much higher incomes, and this forgiveness is like something we need to do. Well, most of us graduated with student loans. We should look at what we're doing, change the policies, and forgive the people which, by the way, mostly, because we've looked at this, for-profit colleges.
So the idea
where they didn't graduate.
The idea is context,
context, detail, analysis, fairness, explain it to the people, and so.
No. Look, I couldn't agree with you more.
Day 2 would continue, would ask the next round of questions. Take the time, and it could be like a long form. Take the time to go through the whole thing, not break news, not so-and-so said X today, and then so-and-so said X, and you think that you're doing a good press because then you say, okay, get someone who agrees with it and get someone who disagrees with it. Who cares? Is it right or is it wrong? What makes it right or wrong? So I'm a nerd about that. Go get the details.
No, and it's great, and I think modestly that the Atlantic does that.
You do.
But what I would say, and this is I think of it as the tragedy of metrics. Unfortunately now, because we can see what people are interested in, I will tell you that, and this is not a defense of the press, I will tell you that the readership and the viewership for detailed policy discussions is not what you may think it is. And we have, obviously we do it anyway. There are a high number of quality publications that do it anyway because it's the right thing to do. But getting Americans to stop looking at TikTok and Instagram to get their information and actually spend 10, 15, 20 minutes reading about the earned income tax credit, which is extraordinarily important, but sounds extraordinarily boring. It's very difficult.
So I wouldn't try to do the day two thing with everybody. I would have a quality publication that will appeal to the people who want to appeal it. It should be policymakers, influencers, some senators, some congressmen, and it would be enormously influential in policy, and it would probably make money. You could probably charge a lot for it, because there are a lot of stuff that we pay for in research for the detailed analysis. We'll pay $30,000 a year. We're not paying $799 a year. $79, something like that. There is a place for it. JPMorgan spends $1 billion a year in research. Real detailed research and analysis does actually work, but it isn't trying to sell the paper. But it'll inform the public, and people. You have a lot of think tanks who do some of that in reality, but they often get hijacked by board members and whatever.
I'm going to give you an opportunity right now to make some money, and I will say that I think it's a great idea, and I think you should write a weekly or monthly column for The Atlantic, going through, pick an issue and just write it. I can pay in the low to mid 3 figures per column. But you're not doing. It's your way of giving back. No, and I'm serious. That would be. I think people here would read that.
But it's just when I wrote the op-ed, thank you. But okay, well, if you want, I write a chairman's letter, and the last 20 pages, it's 60 pages long about the company and issues and AI and products and the good, the bad, the ugly of the company. But the last 20 pages is public policy, global policy, public policy. And if you want, may put you to sleep, get that. It has a lot of detail in it, and there's a lot of research that supports what I put in there. So.
Okay, but anyway, you'll file a column next week, and we'll see how it goes.
Here's amazing thing. Here's another thing. When I wrote the Washington Post thing, I start by saying we need comprehensive policy and stuff like that. I'd originally give it to the New York Times, and when they read it, it was like, well, it's too complex. I said, but the point I'm making is we need comprehensive, coordinated policy, and you're saying take one little thing out of that and write about just that. I was like, well, fine, I won't write it to the New York Times. So that's why next time I'll call you. But my point is, comprehensive policy may be complicated. It is necessary. And so, to me, that is important. We get these things right. And like I said, we could fix all these things.
Let's spend the remaining time we have on the world.
Right.
The biggest worries you have about America's place in the world, does it have to do with the rise of authoritarian regimes?
No, it has to do with in February of 2022, Russia sent 300,000 troops and thousands of tanks into a free and democratic European nation. They're now, and at the time I said this is bad because this is not something we've seen since World War II. Under the threat of nuclear blackmail, clearly you now have working hand in hand with Iran and North Korea. Then you had the vicious attacks in Israel, working in hand with Iran and North Korea. And now you have this, it's not even evil access, and I'll talk about China in a second because I wouldn't put them quite there, but coordinated activity between the Houthis, Hezbollah, Iran, Russia, and they are literally trying to tear down the Western world that was set up, the rule of law that was set up after World War II, aided and abetted by some other autocratic nations, and China isn't part of that, but they are aiding and abetting it. And as long as they're there, we have a very complex relationship. So these wars, I hope they'll eventually end up in some kind of armistice or settlement, hopefully in the interest of the people of Ukraine and Israel, with some kind of peace and security for both. But this battle can go on for a lot longer. And it's more of an economic battle of trade, influence, innovation, technology, et cetera. And they have said they want, that America's abused its position in the Western world, which we have a little bit, by the way, I won't go through here, and that we need to understand this is about the freedom, the safety of the freedom and democracy in the world for the next 100 years. And I'm not saying it's going to happen. I'm not ringing the alarm. But this decision we may accomplish that or fail in the next 10 years. And I don't want to see a book written 20 years from now saying how the West lost, that we got divided on economic issues, we didn't support allies when it was necessary, the autocratic nations, deliberately over an extended period of time try to nick away at American economic alliances, trade alliances, that we have done a terrible job in development finance. Think of what we're not doing in Africa and what we're not doing in Latin America. China is all over Latin America today and Africa today. we better get our act together. And, even America doesn't have a divine right to success. We are being challenged right now heavily, militarily and economically around the world. And I'm hoping that we take it that seriously.
What would you do to ensure that America's deterrence power remains overwhelming or becomes overwhelming again?
Yeah, there are fundamentals here, okay? This is where I say it's got to be comprehensive because one alone doesn't work. We have to have the strongest military in the world. And unfortunately, we're going to have to spend more. So I would be a little bit more like a Ronald Reagan here. If you guys spend another $100 billion more, we are going to spend $100 billion more. And that's the first thing when your adversary sees something that you're not going to sit back and be worried about it, that it minimizes the chance you actually have a war or something like that. The foundation for everything we do, and so America's got the money, the military, the morality. People trust us around the world. They're mad at us for the misuse of sanctions and the dollar and some of the wars which might have been unnecessary, but they still trust America. If we reach out a hand to most of these nations, they'd rather take our hand than Russia's or China's. And we should understand that, but we got to treat them respectfully to do that. That's more diplomacy, economic relations, et cetera. But the foundation to all of it is our own economy. So I've already spoken about the things we got to do to improve our economy. I think we have to teach civics. I think we have to fix the bottom.
How do you teach civics when there's so much polarization about what even the meaning of America is?
They don't teach in school. I mean, I've been asking your parents, if you're a parent here, go look at the curriculum they teach in the school. Go look at it. And most of the parents who do that tell me, American history is not on it. And I think it should be on it. It could talk about the bad part of American history, but it should also talk about freedom of speech, and freedom of religion, and the founding fathers, and the extraordinary privileges that Americans have. And then we got to fix the bottom 20% because they should benefit from this too. So it's hard. We got to do all those things, and you have to remember I think the only one who can lead the world is America. It isn't like there's a replacement. If it's not us, you have a system that goes back to like Europe in the 15, 16, 17, 1800s. It's kind of a little bit of chaos as you have shifting alliances all over the place and shifting economic alliances. Every nation, if you go to any nation around the world, they've got their own national security interest. So for us, it's X, which what it is. But for Germany, it's they need cheaper energy, which they really should get from us. So that's like I talked about comprehensive policy. When we delayed those LNG things, which is a little bit of virtual signaling to the climate, having LNG go to Germany has 3 virtues. It's great economically for America. It ties them into an ally they can trust for safe and affordable and secure energy. And it's good for CO2 because replacing gas, if they don't do that, all these countries go back to coal. So it has all these benefits, and we didn't do it because we're virtual signaling. And so it's doable, and like I said, America is the only one who can actually really do it, and I think we have to get organized and realize we're in this comprehensive battlefield and start to coordinate and organize, and you should know that China already does the coordination. They're already doing all this, okay? Where they're laying ground, where they're laying people, where they're putting people, how they're supporting nations, how they're building the bridges, how they're putting their technology in certain countries. They're already doing it. They've already got a 20-year plan. We're like, you wake up in the morning, you want to have your beer and go do what you want to do. We need to be a little more thoughtful. And so
China does that because it has one guy who makes the rules.
Yeah.
I mean, that's, and we're never going to have a system like that. We're too consultative. But let me ask you this
but we did. Like for World War II, we did.
Right.
FDR did. Truman, Eisenhower, Nixon, Carter, Reagan, they did it for...
There was the clarity of the Cold War.
Exactly. And now we have the clarity of this, which we should explain to people. And I also, by the way, make Washington, D.C. go back to work. I can't believe when I come down here, the empty buildings. I mean, the people who work for you are not going to the office anymore. That bothers me. I mean, I don't allow that JP.
Well, we know what he would do on day one as president.
Yeah. We're all going back to work.
Let me ask you this one final question, and prompted by something that you said. You talk about the need for American leadership and engagement, not only on military, but on development spending and trade and everything. There are a lot of people in the Republican Party who are soft isolationist in intention or belief. Then you said that we need to spend $100 billion more on the military. There are a lot of people in the Democratic Party who don't believe that at all and would oppose any increases in defense spending. You're in the middle. You're a centrist. Would this country be better served by having a powerful centrist party at this point?
Look, I don't know that when you say centrist, you're still putting people in a bucket. I'm different than other people. I'm trying to figure out what works and what doesn't work. I'm not talking about what works for Democrats, centrists, or Republicans. I'm simply trying to talk about what actually works. And but I think people bridging the gap, yes. If that's what you mean by centrist, absolutely. If you mean people trying to understand, what they need to compromise to make the next step, absolutely. Democracy by its nature is compromise. That is what democracy is. So when people say we're not compromising, I'm like, really? That's what democracy is. The majority kind of gets its way, but not all the time. And then but you're right. If we have two left and two right, then we have flip-flopping policies. That makes it hard for everybody. If you think about business, things conducive to actually growing an economy, consistent policies, fair policies, neutral tax policies, as opposed to tax policies which are favoring all these various different things. And so, yeah, reaching across it would be a great thing. Collaboration is a great thing.
Jamie, well, I want to thank the current CEO of JPMorgan Chase and future Atlantic columnist, Jamie Dimon, for joining us today. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Please welcome the Atlantic's Alice McCown.
Okay, thank you all for our amazing speakers.